In my last video that I submitted to the Khan Academy Talent Search, I talked about Nash equilibria and game theory. This time I thought I'd do something totally different and talk about a concept in interpersonal dynamics called crossing the net. What is crossing the net? To illustrate that, let's take this example. Imagine there are two people, Al and Jackie, and they're having lunch. Al notices that Jackie is checking Facebook on her smartphone while they're having lunch. Al notices this once, notices this twice, and is getting a little annoyed. Finally, after the fifth or sixth time, Al is fed up enough to finally blurt out, "Are you listening to me? You don't care what I'm saying." And Jackie says, "Of course I care what you're saying. I'm having lunch with you." Al responds, "Well then, why are you always checking your phone?" And Jackie says, "I don't always check my phone. I happen to be checking it right now. You are so sensitive." What started as a friendly lunch has escalated into something where both people are very annoyed at each other. What has happened? Well, one way to think about this is to think about it as a situation where both people have crossed the net. What is the net? Well, you can imagine a net between Al and Jackie, kind of like a tennis net, and Al's over here on this side and Jackie's over here. What does Al know about? Well, on this side of the net, Al knows about Al's own thoughts, his own feelings, and his observations of what's going on. Similarly, Jackie is aware of her own thoughts, her feelings, and of course what she observes about the situation as well. What is crossing the net? Well, crossing the net is when Al assumes Jackie's thoughts, feelings, or observations, because Al doesn't know what Jackie's actually thinking, but if Al crosses the net and assumes what Jackie is thinking, that's where a problem occurs. Similarly, if Jackie assumes what Al is thinking or feeling, that's where Al might get defensive or Jackie is crossing the net. You'll notice in this conversation that occurred, this happened many times. So for example, when Al said, "Are you listening to me? You don't care what I'm saying." Al is assuming that Jackie doesn't care what he's saying. Al has crossed the net and is picking up and is assuming something about Jackie's thoughts and feelings. Similarly, when Jackie says, "You are so sensitive," she's assuming that Al is a really sensitive person. And of course, this implies that he is oversensitive, which is bound to make Al defensive and annoyed back at Jackie. How could a conversation like this have played out differently? Well, one way to do it is by making sure that each person stays on their side of the net. So let's just take this example of "you don't care what I'm saying," what Al said. If Al wants to stay on Al's side of the net, he would do something like this. He would state first an observation, and then second, the impact on what had happened to Al. So for example, he could say, "Jackie, I noticed you've been checking Facebook on your phone, and that makes me feel sad because I wanted to have a nice lunch with you, or that makes me feel ignored." By saying an observation of what has happened, and secondly, the impact on Al is staying on his side of the net. What are the benefits of this? Well, there are many benefits. First, Al isn't offending Jackie because Al isn't assuming something about Jackie that Jackie will easily get defensive about. But Al has still brought up his own point of view and has stated a behavior of Jackie, namely checking Facebook, that he is uncomfortable with or is unhappy with. The second benefit, which I think is very clever, is it reduces the chance of arguments by sticking purely to the facts. If you cross the net, you often get into an argument about whether or not what you assumed about the other person is correct. So when Al says, "You don't care what I'm saying," Jackie, of course, immediately argues that she does care about what Al is saying. And you could go back and forth on this, because Al has assumed something about Jackie, there's really no truth. But by stating these two things, by stating one, an observation about what has happened, the fact that Jackie is checking Facebook, and two, the impact on Al, that Al feels sad, neither of those things are really things that can be argued. The observation is what has happened, and Al's feelings are Al's own feelings. You can't really argue about that. So in this way, people are able to have more substantive arguments about what actually has happened, rather than arguing about people's opinions on what might have happened. The last benefit is there's a bigger chance to find out what is actually happening. Because Al is not being so antagonistic, Jackie could open up to Al and say, oh yes, I'm sorry, I'm checking Facebook, maybe because my aunt's in the hospital and my cousin said she'd update Facebook when we find out what's happening. Or something of the sort. It might not be the case that such an extreme thing is happening, but at least the chance for Jackie to explain what she's doing has occurred, all because Al has stayed on his side of the net. So to sum up, not crossing the net, I think, is a really key lesson in interpersonal dynamics. It allows people to communicate difficult concepts to each other, such as being annoyed or feeling sad at the other person, but in a very non-offensive way. By sticking to your own side of the net, by sticking to your own thoughts, feelings, and observations, we can improve the way we communicate with other people.